Tonight, shoppers beware the supermarket shortage. Scenes like this all across the country. Store shelves empty. Produce, meats, and even some cereals hard to find, with 15% of all groceries out of stock. The Omicron variant forcing more workers to call out sick, and many Americans are choosing to eat at home. How long could the shortage last as it collides with record inflation? Prices soaring at their fastest rate in nearly 40 years. The surge in COVID cases driving up hospitalizations and deaths. Our Kate Snow got exclusive access inside the largest ICU in the country. 90% of the patients there are unvaccinated, most now on ventilators, some in their 20s and 30s. And tonight, the action from President Biden to get more tests to schools. Shooting outrage, days of protest in North Carolina over the fatal shooting of a black man by a white off-duty police officer. That cop says he was acting in self-defense, that his car with his family inside was being attacked. Cell phone video following the incident shows a nurse rendering first aid, what she says happened, plus the 911 call the officer made right after the shooting. Boris under fire, the British Prime Minister apologizing before Parliament for attending a party at Downing Street during the height of the pandemic. The calls tonight for him to resign. Crypto scam? Major celebrities including Kim Kardashian and Floyd Mayweather sued over promoting a cryptocurrency on social media, why investors believe it was all part of a scheme. And snowstorm delivery, the first responders helping a woman in labor trek through the woods after a foot and a half of snow shut down the roads. Top story starts right now. Hey, good evening. I'm Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story tonight with the economic strain on this country. Inflation rising at its fastest rate in 40 years, and now a perfect storm of issues leading to a grocery shortage. You may have noticed empty shelves at your local supermarkets. Basic items like fruits and vegetables and meats are becoming increasingly hard to come by. An estimated 15% of all groceries are out of stock. A surge in Omicron cases fueling this short supply. More Americans loading up on groceries and eating at home to avoid the virus. Grocery store workers, food manufacturers, and truck drivers all calling out sick. Some supermarkets operating with half their employees. Relentless winter storms only making the problem even worse. Let's get right to NBC's Tom Costello, who leads us off tonight from Washington.
It's happening at grocery stores across the country.
Not much lettuce.
Store shelves nearly empty of fruits, vegetables, beef and chicken, even some cereals, bakery and juice items hard to find.
The only milk I can get were 2 tiny bottles of fat-free, so my kids will not be happy about that.
In a typical year, 5 to 10% of grocery items may be unavailable. Today, nationwide, roughly 15% are out of stock. The National Grocers Association tells NBC News, while there is plenty of food in the supply chain, we anticipate consumers will continue to experience sporadic disruptions in certain product categories.
Without major transformation of everything to do in food, farms, retailers, food companies, we're going to see shortages and price increases for the next 12 to 18 months.
The reasons are many. Soaring demand for groceries, with Americans choosing to eat at home during the Omicron surge. Large numbers of food manufacturers and grocery employees out sick with COVID, as many as 50% in some stores. Winter storms paralyzing major interstates, and a backed-up supply chain with a shortage of 80,000 truck drivers nationwide. NBC's Jolene Kent with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg in L.A.
Right now, we have something like 300,000 truck drivers leaving that job every single year. And that creates backups into the warehouses that are reflected all the way here at the ports.
All right, Tom Costello joins us now from Washington, D.C. Tom, this is a real problem. Our team has noticed this in supermarkets all over the country. So with those rising food prices and grocery shortages affecting so many people, have you heard from the experts yet on when we'll get some relief, when things will get back to normal?
Well, I got to tell you, I was on the phone all day and doing interviews all day, and there is universal agreement this is a problem, right? The trade groups that represent the grocery stores, they're not arguing with this. Yes, they say they've got a major problem here. So while you've heard that it may be 12 to 18 months before we are really back to normal, we have deep structural problems across the country with the food distribution network. They were existing before the pandemic. They're even more accentuated now. They've got to address that. But it will be not until the pandemic recedes, staffing levels return to normal, and we address the global food distribution network problems. So the problem is this really is many problems rolled into one. It could be a year or longer, Tom.
All right, Tom Costello leading us off. As you heard in Tom's report there, one of the reasons for those shortages at the supermarkets, extreme weather tying up interstates. Much of the nation just coming out of an Arctic freeze, but that roller coaster in the Midwest and Northeast isn't letting up. Both regions warming up, but that frigid cold expected to return soon. Overnight, more than 100 firefighters struggling to battle flames in those sub-freezing temperatures after a Maryland townhouse caught fire. And in Kentucky, floodwaters trapping this school bus in a ditch. Wow, 3 students there injured. Tonight, 2 million people are under winter storm watches across the Great Plains, and a potential nor'easter could hit early next week. Let's get right to Al Roker with the latest. Al, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
I know you've been busy. A lot of extreme weather out there.
That's right. You mentioned that roller coaster temperatures, Tom. So take a look at this. We're going to see a little moderation for the next 24 hours. Chicago on Thursday, 34, but by Saturday, 10 degrees cooler, 24. Washington Thursday, 50, 28 on Saturday. Here in New York, 46 on Thursday, down to 20 on Saturday. So here's what we're tracking. This late Friday Clipper system comes out from Canada, snow from the plains to the Midwest. Now, here's what we know. Through Saturday morning, accumulating snow for the Midwest. We're talking anywhere from 4 to 8 inches of snow from the Dakotas all the way into Iowa. Strong winds, blowing snow, near blizzard-like conditions. Now, we continue on Saturday. That cold air meets Gulf moisture. So we have a wintry mix to the north, storms down to the south. This thing starts to make its way through the southeast. Sunday snow across the Appalachians. We know that much. Significant icing possible for the Carolinas. Here's what we are looking at. We've got this setup for ice. Warm air aloft. The snow comes in, melts into rain, hits the ground. The ground is at 32 degrees or lower. So, Tom, we're talking about significant icing from southern Virginia all the way into eastern Georgia. Big problems for the airports, Atlanta, Charlotte, Raleigh. And then as we continue, here's where it gets tricky. What we're watching, the location of the rain-snow line is uncertain. The path of this storm is going to determine who gets snow and who gets rain. So right now, it looks like it comes along the coast, and that would bring the heaviest snow inland. Roanoke, Washington, Albany, Rochester, Pittsburgh. But if this moves 25, 30 miles to the east, it's out over the ocean. The colder air moves to the east, and then we are going to see heavy snow, Norfolk, Washington, along the I-95 corridor, New York, Albany, Boston. We are looking right now with this current track that we see, the heaviest snow is going to be inland parts of New England, New York, on into Pennsylvania, and the spine of the Appalachians. But we're going to continue to track this. We'll be back tomorrow night, Tom, you can bet, to see what the latest is on our models.
All right, Al, we thank you for that. So that extreme weather also affecting the supply chain crunch. And today, the major headline on inflation and the report from the Labor Department tonight confirming what many of us have already seen, higher prices when it comes to gas, cars, and groceries, with those new numbers showing inflation surging to its fastest pace in nearly 40 years. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has more with reaction from Washington.
Tonight, the alarming spike in inflation soaring to its highest level in nearly 40 years, casting a shadow over America's entire economy. The stunning surge in December, 7% over a year ago, the pace of inflation slowing slightly over last month, still marking 3 straight months with inflation over 6%.
It is bringing a lot of unnecessary stress, and it's already a struggle, especially living paycheck to paycheck.
Lisa Gallegos is an elementary school office manager and a single mom of 3 in Colorado. Prices for gas and groceries are so high, like many Americans, she's had to start relying on a food bank.
I'm fine. I can go with no meal a day, but I want to make sure that my kids at least have, food in their bellies.
Inflation sending already sky-high prices soaring even higher across the board. Gas prices up 50% over last year. Used cars and trucks rising 37%. Meat, chicken, fish, and eggs 13% higher. Rent and mortgages going up 4%. Tonight, nearly half of all small businesses say they're having to raise their prices.
When the bills come in, what do you say?
I mean, I'm almost floored.
At their dry cleaning businesses in Maryland, Ishmael and Rochelle Wilson feel like they're the ones being taken to the cleaners. Plastic bags, shoulder protectors, receipt paper, all costing way more.
This time last year, we paid $24.50 for a box of hangers. Now we pay $52.95.
More than double.
Box of hangers. More than double.
And it's cutting into everything that we need to do to grow and to sustain, quite frankly.
And on top of it, they'd already been struggling in the pandemic. So this Friday, the Wilsons are shutting down one of their stores. The president today tweeting, "We are making progress in slowing the rate of price increases, but there's still more work to do." But Republicans are blasting the president with rising wages, unable to keep up with record inflation.
Families are struggling. People that are hurt most, of course, seniors, people on a fixed income, young couples trying to get by, and it is the Biden policies.
All right, Peter joins us now from the White House. Peter, when you watch that report, you feel for those families and those small business owners. What's the White House saying tonight about really how long these rising prices will last?
Yeah, Tom, you'll remember just 6 months ago, President Biden insisted that this rising inflation was temporary. But tonight, the White House says that higher prices could last until the end of the year. The president and his aides, they're emphasizing that their urgent efforts are in place now to try to unstick those supply chains, to promote competition among businesses to help reduce costs, and ultimately to pass the president's social spending bill, that Build Back Better plan that remains stalled in the Senate. Tom?
All right, Peter Alexander from the White House tonight. Peter, thank you. So for more on inflation and what we saw in Tom's report, what's happening at the supermarkets, let's bring in CNBC's Jeff Cox to break it all down for us. Jeff, we know the Fed has said that they're going to start to hike up rates, but can you explain to our viewers how quickly those rates will go up, when we'll actually see the prices start to cool in places like supermarkets?
Yeah, thanks. Well, the Fed is probably going to start hiking interest rates come March. So what we know about Fed policy and interest rates and that kind of thing is it always operates with a lag effect. So what we mean by that is maybe 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year. So there won't be any immediate relief. And there's also no kind of one-to-one transmission mechanism there as well. So once the Fed starts to tighten monetary policy, it's going to take a while for any of that to really start to translate at the marketplace, at the cash register, and with some of these supply issues that we've talked about, it just is really almost unprecedented rise in prices now.
No, it really is. So people are going to be looking at their budgets. They're going to be shopping. There's certain stuff they need. The prices are going up. So should people buy the things they know they're going to use right now in bulk to curb some of those price hikes? And are there certain items that they should just maybe avoid if they can, like if they need a new car or something like that? Should they just wait?
Yeah, I don't want to be the guy to come on here and tell people to go out and start, run into the supermarket and start hoarding things. Look, I look at it as just sort of a good analogy would be just kind of buying at the top of the stock market. You don't want to buy when prices are at their most expensive. Look, as far as the trajectory of inflation goes, it's hard to tell, but it's really hard to imagine that we're still going to be running at this high of a rate, say 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now. I think what policymakers really underestimated was that there was going to be a longer duration and that there was more driving this than just simple supply chain issues related to the pandemic. So no, I mean, my simple answer to your question is no, I don't think that people should go out and start buying things like crazy. Especially, you look at, you had mentioned car prices, which is an important example. Used vehicle prices are up over 37% over the last year. So they're obviously very expensive right now. If you could hold off on that purchase, I would certainly wait for that. I think inflation is going to continue to run hot, but I think this 40-year high that we're seeing right now is not likely to persist forever.
Yeah, Jeff, so you mentioned the stock market, and people may be a little confused today. They saw these headlines about historic high inflation, and yet the market was also up. Explain to our viewers why that happened.
Well, you go figure whatever happens with the stock market. But I think what today's reaction was all about is that even though this was a really high number, it was pretty much in line with what Wall Street expects. I think most of the folks that I speak to on the street, most of the strategists and economists expect that as we go through the year, this may have been the top, at least in terms of year-over-year gains. We're going to now start to watch month-over-month gains, but this was kind of right in line with what the market expected today. So So people kind of went out and bought the dip here. The market's been in kind of choppy waters lately, looking at some of these things. So the number today really didn't throw anybody off for that big of a loop. So people went in and they bought.
CNBC's Jeff Cox. Jeff, thank you. We want to turn out of the pandemic and some positive news from the CDC on the Omicron variant, which makes up an estimated 98% of cases in the U.S. right now. A study found that the strain poses a lower risk of serious disease than the Delta variant, but hospitalizations and deaths are still rising around the country. NBC News national correspondent Kate Snow got an exclusive look inside the nation's largest medical ICU at the Cleveland Clinic.
How does the situation right now compare to last year?
We have more patients. Our patients are sicker. Our teams are tired and exhausted too.
In a COVID ICU unit at the Cleveland Clinic's main campus, 25 patients struggle to hang on. As soon as one recovers or dies, another moves in.
We're seeing patients in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s.
Good morning.
Nurse Tim Washington came on at 7 a.m.
First thing I did is kind of look in the room to see if my patients were still there.
Still alive.
Still alive, right.
And they are today.
They are today.
Most patients here are on ventilators. 90% are unvaccinated.
Do you personally feel anger? What do you feel?
If I say I didn't feel anger, I'd be lying, because this can be prevented with vaccinations.
There was some good news today. A new study from Southern California finding the Omicron variant is less likely to lead to hospitalization, ICU admission, or death than the Delta variant.
Those infected with Omicron who were hospitalized had a shorter duration of hospital stay.
But the sheer volume of Omicron cases is straining the system. At the Cleveland Clinic, 5% of the staff is also out sick. National Guard were called in to run testing centers, clean, and deliver meals. Respiratory therapist Myron Drisson used to be assigned to 8 patients. Now he'll sometimes cover 17.
When that alarm clock goes off in the morning, it's a little bit, here we go again.
People come to the Cleveland Clinic from all over the country for specialty services or surgeries. But right now, because of the COVID situation, no elective surgeries until at least January 30th.
That's actually the rationing of care.
Nationwide, ICUs are 82% full, a pandemic high. Dr. Hassan Cooley, who heads critical care at the Cleveland Clinic, says if their ICUs grow more crowded, it could be devastating.
I guess this is a morbid thought, but does that mean that somebody that comes in with a heart attack might end up dying because they can't get into your ICU?
That is possible, or they would wait in the emergency room, or waiting for a bed in the intensive care unit, or they may be actually crashing on the floor.
In the COVID unit, 73-year-old Ron Perelka is vaccinated but not boosted. He has an underlying medical condition.
I'll tell you, I was the last one to think that I would get it.
What would you say to people who think that Omicron is mild and it's no big deal?
I'm willing to go walk out the door and they can come and sit in here and see what it's like.
He was one of the only ICU patients even able to speak. Kate Snow, NBC News, Cleveland.
All right, we want to head to Capitol Hill now tonight, where all eyes are on the Senate after President Biden delivered that speech in Georgia yesterday aimed at passing 2 voting rights bills, his vice president echoing the president's push in an NBC News exclusive interview. NBC's chief Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake has more.
But we just ordered.
Tonight, speaking to NBC's Craig Melvin, Vice President Harris vowing to push ahead on 2 Democratic voting rights bills opposed by all Republicans.
I will not absolve the 50 Republicans in the United States Senate from responsibility for upholding one of the most basic and important tenets of our democracy, which is free and fair elections and access to the ballot for all eligible voters.
What about Senator Manchin? What about Senator Sinema?
I don't think anyone should be absolved from the responsibility of preserving and protecting our democracy, especially when they took an oath to protect and defend our Constitution.
But Manchin and Sinema remain opposed to changing historic Senate rules to pass the bills with just 50 votes instead of 60.
What'd you make of the president's speech last night?
It was a good speech. He gave a good speech.
I mean, he said. Did it change your opinion at all on any of these, on the Senate rules changes?
Yeah, I'm still talking.
But if Democrats weren't united by the president's speech, Republicans were, slamming Biden for attempting what they call an unconstitutional federal takeover of elections.
And so President Biden goes down the same tragic road taken by President Trump,
casting doubt on the reliability of American elections.
All right, Garrett joins us now from Capitol Hill. And Garrett, we heard Vice President Harris there. What's the president's next move when it comes to passing these voting rights bills? Does he have a next move?
Well, the president's going to come here tomorrow, meet with Senate Democrats behind closed doors, try to convince them to make this rules change. It's worth pointing out the president came to visit with House Democrats twice and tried to be the closer on his social spending bill. He wasn't able to get the votes he wanted by the deadlines Democrats had set. In this case, their deadline is Monday. Tom?
All right, Garrett, thank you for that. And you can watch much more of Craig's sit down with Vice President Harris tomorrow on the Today Show. All right, tonight, Prince Andrew's legal troubles intensifying. Virginia Giuffre accusing the prince of sexual abuse when she was a minor. Prince Andrew's lawyers tried to block the lawsuit, but today, the federal judge refusing to throw that case out. Dasha Burns has that story.
Tonight, a legal blow to Prince Andrew, a judge rejecting the request to dismiss a federal lawsuit against him.
The case can proceed into discovery. That means depositions can be taken, presumably that of Prince Andrew at some point, and more of the facts will come to light.
The suit alleging he sexually abused Virginia Giuffre when she was just 17 years old. The prince's lawyers requested a dismissal of Giuffre's case based on a recently released 2009 settlement between Giuffre and Jeffrey Epstein. The agreement had a $500,000 payment to Giuffre and contained language releasing any other person who, quote, could have been included as a potential defendant from future suits. Prince Andrew's lawyers claiming the prince could be covered under that clause, but the judge pushing back, saying of the agreement the intentions of Miss Giuffre and Epstein concerning the release are anything but clear, and concluding Prince Andrew's motion to dismiss the complaint is denied in all respects.
Is this a setback for Prince Andrew? It's never good when you find yourself in a civil case like this one, a high-profile case with a lot of moving parts. This keeps the case on the public's radar screen. And so for the prince, that means he continues to be subjected to the sort of scrutiny that the royal family is typically able to avoid.
Giuffre's lawyer saying she's pleased and looks forward to a judicial determination of the merits of her claims. Prince Andrew's lawyer hasn't responded to our request for comment. Giuffre is alleging Prince Andrew sexually assaulted her on at least 3 occasions when she was a minor in the early 2000s, including at Epstein's former girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell's home in London. Giuffre releasing this photo appearing to show her with Prince Andrew that night as proof of the encounter. The prince denying all wrongdoing, but his reputation still reeling from a 2019 BBC interview where he suggested the photo was fake.
Nobody can prove whether or not that photograph has been doctored, but I don't recollect that photograph ever being taken.
And you don't recollect having your hand round her waist in Ghislaine Maxwell's house?
No. The prince stepping back from official royal duties after that interview.
He knows exactly what he's done, and I hope he comes clean about it.
All right, Dasha Burns joins us now live in studio. So, Dasha, the only question now is what happens next for Prince Andrew in this case?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what this development means is that this case is moving forward, which means discovery begins. Documents will need to be turned over. There are going to be depositions, including potentially and likely the deposition of Prince Andrew under oath. Now, that might happen in London, that might happen in the U.S. or at an agreed-upon location. But if this thing does go to trial, it is likely that we will see Prince Andrew in the United States in a courtroom, Tom.
That would be quite the scene. Okay, Dasha, thank you for that. And we want to stay in the UK now. Boris Johnson tonight facing growing calls to resign. I don't know if you've heard about this. The Prime Minister apologizing before Parliament for attending a garden party in May of 2020 when the first wave of COVID was ravaging the country and gatherings were forbidden. Members of Johnson's own party now calling on him to step down. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley is in London for us.
Tonight, a contrite Boris Johnson apologizing before a hostile parliament, admitting for the first time he attended a party while the UK was under strict COVID lockdown.
I regret very much that we did not do things differently that evening, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, and I take responsibility and I apologize.
Johnson conceding he went to a garden party at 10 Downing Street in May of 2020, amid the wave of first COVID deaths, a time when gatherings of more than 2 people were banned. The party just weeks after the Prime Minister's own near-death struggle with the infection.
I believed implicitly that this was a work event, but Mr. Speaker, With hindsight, I should have sent everyone back inside. I should have found some other way to thank them.
The opposition leader not buying that explanation.
His defence that he didn't realise he was at a party. It is so ridiculous that it's actually offensive to the British public. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
The outrage sparked by a leaked email invitation from Johnson's private secretary, which said in part, "We thought it would be nice to make the most of the lovely weather and have some socially distanced drinks in the number 10 garden this evening. Please join us from 6 p.m. and bring your own booze." A stark contrast in tone from the messages Johnson delivered publicly that spring.
I urge you, at this moment of national emergency, to stay at home, protect our NHS, and save lives.
A spokesperson for the Prime Minister denies he ever saw that invitation, but now, among Johnson's own party, signs that support may be waning.
He said with hindsight he would have done things differently, which for me is an acceptance from the Prime Minister that it was wrong, and therefore I don't think he can continue as leader of the Conservatives.
A Snap poll showing 2/3 of adults in the UK say Johnson should resign.
He needs to go. He's setting a bad example to Britain across the world.
But I'd say the majority of us have broken the rules somewhere not to suit ourselves. He's only human at the end of the day.
But with the next general election in the UK more than 2 years away and a defiant Prime Minister unlikely to step down, it'll be up to Conservatives to decide if they want to remove their leader from office.
How does Johnson survive this one?
The honest answer is it's very hard to see that. I mean, you have to have the sort of the goodwill of your own party. You'd have to sort of regain that trust. And that's very difficult at present. Like in a boxing match, he's on the ropes.
All right, Boris Johnson on the ropes. Matt Bradley joins us now from outside of Parliament in London. Matt, so as you said in your report there, most people think it's unlikely Johnson will resign. He's not one to shy away from a fight. So what power does his party have to remove him from office?
Quite a lot of power is the short answer, Tom. The fact is, Prime Minister Johnson is not a president. He doesn't need to be impeached. You don't need to wait until the end of his term in office. All the Conservative or Tory party, as they're also called, needs to do is have 15% of its seated members submit letters to what's called the 1922 committee that essentially runs that party. And that's only about 52 members of parliament. They need to submit these letters, and they do it anonymously. The only person who knows how many letters have been submitted is the chairman of that 1922 committee. Once that's all done, once more than 50 or 52 have actually submitted those letters, then they can call for essentially a vote of no confidence and replace him just with a vote from within the party. They don't need a national election. They don't need any of that. So it's quite easy, and it's why here in Britain and in most parliamentary systems, the Prime Minister always has to watch his back. Tom?
All right, Matt Bradley with the trouble Boris Johnson is facing there in London. Next up, the controversies continue for Serbian tennis star Novak Djokovic. He's again in hot water after admitting he gave a false statement on his travel form to get into Australia and that he failed to immediately isolate when he tested positive for the coronavirus last month. Priscilla Thompson has more tonight.
Tonight, the world's top-ranked tennis star speaking out, admitting to breaking isolation rules and giving false information on travel forms ahead of the Australian Open. Novak Djokovic took to Instagram, blaming his team for, quote, ticking the incorrect box when asked if he had traveled internationally in the 2 weeks before his flight to Australia, a violation of the country's COVID restrictions. His form said no, despite images showing him in Spain and Serbia at that time. This was a human error and certainly not deliberate, Djokovic wrote. The star athlete also acknowledging that he didn't isolate immediately after testing positive for COVID last month, a question that led his brother to shut down a press conference just days earlier.
Is it true that on the 16th of December he did test positive and he knew he was positive?
Yes, the whole process was public and all the documents that were public are legal, so...
Was he at an event on the 17th of December?
Okay, so this press conference is adjourned at the moment.
Djokovic now clarifying, quote, misinformation which needs to be corrected, saying that after attending a basketball game, he took a rapid test that came back negative and out of an abundance of caution also took a PCR test. The next day, while awaiting those results, Djokovic says he attended an event, giving awards to kids, all maskless. Later that day, he says he got the positive PCR result. Still, Djokovic participated in an interview and photo shoot with French newspaper L'Equipe, a decision he now says was a mistake, writing, "While I went home after the interview to isolate, on reflection, this was an error of judgment, and I accept that I should have rescheduled this commitment." The statements come amid growing fallout over whether the 9-time Australian Open winner should be allowed to remain in the country to compete. The hashtag Djokovic out now trending on Twitter. One of his competitors, Andy Murray, saying this.
We do want the best players there, but like I said, I think there's still a few questions to be answered.
Australian officials tell NBC News they're considering whether to deport Djokovic. Hanging in the balance for him, a chance to make history, winning the most men's singles Grand Slams ever.
All right, Priscilla Thompson joins us now live in studio. So, Priscilla, it seems like we're talking about this every day because there's a new development every day. So my question is, when is the tournament going to start, and could he possibly be pulled after starting the tournament?
That could absolutely be the case. We know that the draw is taking place tomorrow and the tournament is set to begin on Monday. And officials haven't given a timeline on when they are going to make this decision. Djokovic's lawyer submitted a ton of paperwork today. Officials say that paperwork was very lengthy and it is absolutely going to impact the timeline. So it's very possible that he could get pulled in the middle of those matches.
Okay, adds a lot of drama to this tournament, the Australian Open. All right, Priscilla, thank you so much. Still ahead tonight, shooting outrage, the protest over the fatal shooting of a black man by a white off-duty police officer. He says he was acting in self-defense, but some witnesses are disputing that claim. The 911 calls just released. You'll hear them. Plus, the man breaching the cockpit of a Miami-bound flight, how he managed to get inside. And the new developments on that deadly shooting on the set of Rust. The attorney for the film's Armorer says he knows where the live ammunition came from. Stay with us. Top story just getting started. Back now with the outrage in North Carolina over the deadly shooting of a black man by a white off-duty police officer. The officer claims he was acting in self-defense and that the man attacked his car with his family inside, but some witnesses are saying something different happened. And tonight, the 911 calls are released. You will hear them. NBC News correspondent Sinclair Esemwa reports, and a warning, some of the footage you're about to see may be disturbing.
Justice! Tonight, demonstrations in North Carolina leaving a city on edge.
He was a man. He was a father. He was a cousin. He was a nephew. He was a son. And everyone should be out in the street.
After the fatal shooting of 37-year-old Jason Walker, a black man shot by an off-duty white sheriff's deputy, Jeffrey Hash, in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Now a family in mourning.
Hopefully, the system does what's right, and gets to the bottom of this. And we really just want justice for Jason.
And a community left with questions. The off-duty officer calling 911 himself after the shooting, those recordings recently released.
Listen to me. Are you right beside the subject?
I am.
Okay. Is he breathing?
He's gone, man.
Aftermath of the shooting also caught on cell phone video verified by NBC, appearing to show a lifeless Walker on the ground. Then uniformed officers arrive. The deadly encounter happened Saturday, January 8th. Walker's family alleges law enforcement did not render aid to Walker as he died, according to their attorney, saying police were concerned about obscuring how the public would see this killing rather than concerned for Jason. Police did not immediately respond.
It breaks my heart he didn't survive.
Elizabeth Ricks says she is a bystander who rendered first aid to Walker after the incident and can be seen in the cell phone video.
I don't want to take away from Jason or the injustice, and I'm not going to be silent.
Ricks and her partner, who filmed the aftermath, say they were first to the scene and that Hash hit Walker with his car.
Can you speak to that?
That would be one of the facts that would not be able to be commented on one way or another.
Hash's attorney, Parrish Daughtry, spoke to NBC.
He is devastated for the family of Mr. Walker. He is devastated for his own family and for his greater community.
Daughtry tells NBC the matter involves self-defense and vehicle defense claims. Police officials saying they're looking at the truck's computer.
That computer did not record any impact with any person or thing. We currently have no witnesses who claim that anyone was hit by this truck.
The city's police chief adding evidence suggests Walker ran into traffic and jumped onto Hash's truck, who then shot Walker and called the emergency line.
I just shot him.
You just shot him? You said you shot him?
Yes, he jumped on my car.
Did he have any weapons, sir?
No, he just tore my wipers off and started beating the door.
Hash has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation, according to the county sheriff. As demonstrators march for answers on the street, online, a hashtag Justice for Jason Walker has emerged.
What does justice look like for you all?
We should have justice. And in order for us to have justice, we have to dismantle the criminal justice system right now and rebuild this system, because this system is not working.
Okay, Zinkley Asamoah joins us now from here in New York. So, Zinkley, obviously it's difficult to get information from officials during the pending investigations, but what are some other facts in the case that you've come across that you want our viewers to understand?
Yeah, Tom, so here's what we know. According to his 911 call, Hash was in the car with his wife and his child. Hash has been with the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office since 2005. That's according to police, who add that the weapon used by Hash was not his service weapon. But still, there are more questions than answers. Police have not disclosed how many shots were fired or exactly where Walker was shot. And so the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation is investigating, and the FBI is also monitoring this case, Tom.
Zinkley, real quick before you go, I noticed there was a little bit of a discrepancy there. It sounded like the head of the police department said that there were no witnesses, but we heard someone in your story say that they had witnessed it. Do we understand why there's a discrepancy there?
That's exactly right. The police are saying no witnesses have said that that was the case, but witnesses on the ground are offering a different report. And so that's why we're seeing a larger investigation that we're going to have to follow in the days to come.
All right, Zinkley Asamoah with the latest developments tonight. Zinkley, thank you. We want to get right to some of the legal analysis of this shooting. Let's bring in Dr. Cedric Alexander and really some of the police work that's going to be done. He's an NBC News legal analyst and a former detective and police chief, and was a member of President Obama's task force on policing. So, Cedric, from what you've read so far and what you heard just now from Zinkley's report on this case, what's your sense of what happened and what more do you want to know?
Well, at this point, and certainly after shootings such as this, it has occurred, there's going to be a lot of information moving around. There are going to be witnesses who may have seen things, and then there may be those that are saying they're witnesses, may not be. So here's what has to happen. There's got to be a thorough investigation, and there will be, by the state of North Carolina. They independently need to do this investigation, because that will give the community an opportunity to know that there is an outside agency that's conducting an investigation and not the police department investigating itself. So that was a very smart move on the part of Chief Hawkins there. I think the other thing that's going to be critically important in all of this as well is that as they move through this investigation, putting the puzzle together, physical evidence, witness statements, the officer's statement, the deputy's statements, and others who have maybe been in and around, along with the physical evidence that's going to be collected. All of that together will paint a picture of what occurred in that time frame. And it won't be until then that we have a better idea of what occurred on that particular day at that time. So that's going to be left up to the state of North Carolina to do that investigation. And of course, I think what's going to be critically important here is that Chief Hawkins keep the community as much as she can informed, even though this is not her investigation, so she may be limited to certain information. However, I think what's important here is that the state conduct a thorough, fair investigation, which I'm confident that they will, but being able to share, the state certainly needs to be able to share with that community there in Fayetteville as much information as they can, long as it certainly does not jeopardize the integrity of the case. So this is going to be an ongoing investigation, and the wounds are still very fresh here in terms of the reactions that you're seeing from people in the community. And I think we
Cedric, on that point, though, I just want to get in here. On that point there, you can see Fayetteville has already seen the large crowds of protesters demanding answers. And we've already seen some discrepancies in what the head of the police department is saying and what witnesses are telling the media. So you sort of have that information breakdown already. What do they have to do there to make sure this doesn't get out of control and the public is fully informed of what's happening?
here again, as I said before, North Carolina State Investigative Bureau has to do a investigation, try to keep the community informed as much as they can where that investigation is. Because part of the problem is that there's still a great deal of distrust between police and communities across this country. So when you have an incident such as this, it certainly brings up a lot of old feelings, and it recounts, for many people, they recount other incidents that have certainly gave an appearance of being of some concern. So I think it becomes important here that this investigation allowed to move along, because you're going to get a lot of information from a lot of different people. And at this point, Chief Hawkins is not going to be privy to a lot of this information going forward, merely because it is a state investigation now that is underway. But certainly you're going to have witnesses going to say one thing to the media, another thing to the police. At this point, none of that is going to be credible until those investigators sit down with those individuals, take written statements, recorded statements, line up the evidence, statements along with physical evidence, and along as well, too, with any forensic evidence that may be available, i.e. Body cameras, cell phone cameras, et cetera, et cetera.
Cedric, we thank you for your time tonight and your analysis. All right, when we come back, blood crisis, the historic declaration by the Red Cross as it faces a blood shortage and their call for action tonight. And crypto lawsuit, the celebrity heavy hitters now being accused of scamming investors of a cryptocurrency. Stay with us. At a Top Stories newsfeed, and the man allegedly breaching the cockpit of an American Airlines flight. Video showing that man hanging out of the plane's window after authorities say he rushed into the open flight deck. It happened during boarding at an airport in Honduras. The Miami-bound plane was damaged. The airline says the person was apprehended with the help of that crew and was taken into custody by law enforcement. The Red Cross has declared the first ever national blood crisis. The pandemic has cut donor turnout, canceled blood drives, and created staffing challenges, leading to the worst blood shortage in more than a decade. The Red Cross says it saw a 34% drop in new donors just last year. Typo positive and negative, as well as platelets, are especially needed. Several celebrities and athletes have been sued by investors over an alleged cryptocurrency scam. Kim Kardashian, Floyd Mayweather, and Paul Pierce all named in the class action lawsuit. It accuses Ethereum Max and celebrity promoters of artificially inflating the token's price by making false or misleading claims on social media. The cryptocurrency has lost around 97% of its value since early June. Now to a new lawsuit following the ongoing Rust investigation, that deadly movie set shooting involving Alec Baldwin. Tonight, the attorney representing the film's armorer says he knows how live ammunition made its way onto the set. Miguel Almaguer reports.
Tonight, the attorneys for Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer on the set of Rust, say they know the answer to the question investigators desperately want. How did the bullet that killed cinematographer Helena Hutchins end up in Alec Baldwin's gun? In new court documents, PDQ Arm and Prop, owned by Seth Kenney, is accused of supplying the set with real bullets. The ammunition boxes failed to state a material fact. The contents contain both dummy and live ammunition, which were deceptively sold.
The facts are a live round or multiple live rounds ended up in a box labeled as dummies.
In their lengthy court filing, attorneys shifted the blame away from Gutierrez-Reed, saying others also handed and loaded the revolver. Court documents indicate officers found a suspected 7 live rounds distributed inside an ammo box.
With the lawsuit filed just moments ago, NBC News has reached out to Seth Kenney, who provided the ammo. His attorney says, for now, no comment.
No one wants the truth more than I do.
Baldwin continues to post on social media, but has not yet turned over his cell phone to authorities despite a search warrant.
Any suggestion that I am not complying with requests or orders or demands or search warrants about my phone, that's a lie.
Tonight, the investigation ongoing as lawyers race to assign blame. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
All right, we thank Miguel for that. Now to the homeless crisis in America. Encampments springing up in cities from coast to coast. Tonight, Boston removing tents in a troubled area known as Methadone Mile. The city's new mayor outlawing the encampments, but promising to find shelter for the people living inside. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard has that story from Boston.
It is utterly cold.
Tonight, in the dead of winter, the city of Boston sweeping up hundreds of makeshift tents and living quarters in the heart of the city.
If the city offered you a place to stay, would you go?
Absolutely. If it was a stable place, why would you?
In just the last days, the city of Boston cleared out this whole sidewalk of tents. This street is supposed to be next, but it's -9 wind chill today, which only speaks to the complications of those living here. Mark St. John used to live on the streets himself. Once a drug addict, an alcoholic, and convicted bank robber, he turned his life around and now working extensively with those here. What is different about this effort than efforts you've seen over the last decades?
I haven't seen any efforts over the last decades. No one's done anything.
They've just allowed the population to exist?
Yes. Yep.
The city and its new mayor, Michelle Wu, contending this time is different, offering alternative housing options, outreach workers going one by one, a nearby hotel, new openings at a pop-up cottage community nearby, space at the city's shelters.
We have led a housing surge. We've created enough housing that is low threshold, medically staffed and supported for each one of the residents of the encampments. Sworn in just under 2 months ago, the mayor moving quickly. Just 2 blocks away, we ran into city workers dismantling encampments. As one woman, who did not want to show her face, appeared from her tent to look for help.
They told us that they're going to get us housing and stuff, but I haven't gotten anything yet. I haven't gotten anything. I don't know what's going on, so I'm going to go down there right now and check out because everybody has to be out of here really soon.
And because they're clearing it out right now?
Yeah.
Did they tell you how many hours you have?
Till tomorrow.
These encampments not unique to Boston, but burgeoning in American cities. Phoenix to Los Angeles to Seattle and San Francisco and more. Homelessness has increased in America each of the last 4 years. The number of unsheltered individuals climbing by 7% just in 2020. The federal government tracking that on a given night, more than 220,000 people are unsheltered. Concerns the situation will continue to get worse as home and rental prices soar and the pandemic lingers.
Nobody in America really wants to be living in an encampment. It's not a choice that they're actively making. It's a choice made out of lack of better options.
Since October, multiple deaths at these encampments. The Boston Police Department reporting 34 aggravated assaults and 12 robberies in that time, too.
It's not the place to be. You see people die every day. I'm getting tired of walking over needles, human waste, blood all over the bathrooms.
The mayor says the city intends to end these encampments for good, but just how far the city will go to enforce this, unclear.
Our concern now is that the mayor has given an imposed deadline of January 12th, where it's an or else. We're going to come in and take away and sweep away all the tents.
Is there potential these individuals would be arrested?
The goal is that that will not be necessary because we have actually supported everyone exactly how they needed.
There are going to be a number of individuals who reject the alternative options that you have provided them. And in this dead of winter here, their perceived last layer of defense, a tent, a tarp, are being thrown away. How did you grapple with the decision knowing that consequence?
Every single day that goes by, as the temperatures plummet, it becomes even more of a life or death situation, living unhoused without heat or hot water. Working with people, meeting people where they are, leads to a very different set of conversations about providing housing and having that trusting relationship to be able to connect people to services.
Mayor Wu said essentially she hopes to prove to people that for individuals who are homeless, that this is just one step on their journey, that if the city is able to provide the social services, the transportation, and the job training to these individuals, that there is a long-term way out. They're even looking at some potential older buildings on the island nearby as detox units and as other housing facilities for these individuals. She hopes to make Boston a place that proves that the proactive approach to individuals with homelessness is the best approach to help these people long-term.
All right, Vaughn, thank you. Coming up, flooding emergency. More than a dozen people killed in Brazil after days of torrential rain. The concern tonight for the country's critical iron production. Back now with Top Stories Global Watch. We begin with the deadly rains in southeastern Brazil. That torrential rain causing flooding and landslides. At least 15 people killed, including children, and more than 28,000 people displaced. The concern tonight that dams will burst as rivers overflow. Railways suspended and roadways shut down. The country's critical iron production also halted over fears water will flood those mines. All right, now the dangerous and record-setting heat wave in Argentina. Temperatures soaring more than 100 degrees above and about 25 degrees above normal. The heat causing power grids to fail. An estimated 700,000 people without power in Buenos Aires. Forecasters say the scorcher will continue through this weekend. And when we come back, the snow angels, the woman going into labor during a winter storm, unable to call 911 for access to the roads, how first responders helped get her through the woods and to the hospital. Finally tonight, the Virginia mother going into labor during last week's massive winter storm with roads closed and power lines down. She braved the elements on foot with some help from a special group of first responders. Take a look. Like many families in the D.C. area, Chris and Noelle and their 3 kids were snowed in last week by the winter storm.
The first thing I saw when I got to the end of our driveway was that a very large tree had come down on a power line, and the power line was almost diagonally coming down across the street.
Noelle was pregnant with the family's 4th child.
And I said, don't go into labor. Sit down. Do not move, because we're not getting out of here today, and nobody's coming to us either.
But that baby had other plans.
Sure enough, I went to go take a nap thinking, oh, I'm not going to go into labor today. And I woke up, my water had ruptured.
With no heat, no power, and limited cell phone service, the couple tried to dial 911.
Both tried. I tried with my phone. She tried with her phone. Both of them, no ring, no voicemail, no nothing.
Finally, Noelle's mother was able to contact first responders, and Jake Kenny from Stafford Fire and Rescue was dispatched.
So the road itself was completely impassable. Still had a little over a quarter mile to go with no way to get there in the ambulance.
Jake and his partner Andy walked the rest of the way on foot, but they arrived with bad news for Noelle.
They walked through power lines and trees to get to me, risking their lives. And when they got to me, they said, absolutely not. We cannot take you that way.
We knew that the route that we had taken, there's no way we were going to be able to get her out.
But there was another way. A neighboring street had already been cleared.
We have a parallel neighboring street through our backyard. If you make it through the woods, you could access that road.
So Noelle bundled up, joining the first responders on a trek through the woods.
She was a trooper. She had to stop every time she had contractions, but as soon as they passed, she was, back up and moving. So she set the pace for getting us out of there, and she crushed it.
Little baby Josephine was born healthy the next day at Stafford Hospital. The family, thankful for the first responders like Jake, who led the way.
If it wasn't for them, I would not have been able to do it. And they were cracking jokes the whole time, making light of the situation. I would have been in full-blown panic mode if it wasn't for them. They were rock stars.
Rock stars is right. We want to thank Chris and Noelle and the Stafford County Fire and Rescue Department for sharing their story. Thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.